So it's usually not my thing to make those kind of videos, but I think it's time to stand up for a person that I really love. And this person is Blake Lively.
There are moments in Hollywood that don't just trend, they detonate. Moments where friendships collapse, alliances shift, and suddenly the same people who once stood side by side start looking like strangers in a courtroom of public opinion. And right now, one of those moments is making waves again, because of a question the internet cannot stop asking.
What was that like, having him be director but also scene partner?
I mean, what an intense job! Like to have to do so many things. I just found myself being like, wow, I really just want to have one job at once.
Did some celebrities secretly regret going against Justin Baldoni while publicly supporting Blake Lively? It sounds dramatic, almost too dramatic. But in Hollywood, drama rarely stays fictional for long. And this story allegedly begins with something much quieter than a scandal. It begins with trust. Before the headlines, before the online debates, before the hashtags split the internet in two, Justin Baldoni wasn't just a name attached to controversy. To many in Hollywood, he was seen as the different kind of actor-director. Someone who openly spoke about emotional vulnerability, respect, and redefining masculinity in an industry built on ego. At the same time, Blake Lively stood as one of Hollywood's most admired actresses, graceful, private, powerful in her silence, and respected for her selective public presence. And when the project It Ends With Us entered the spotlight, expectations were sky high. On paper, it looked like a dream collaboration. But behind the scenes, according to swirling reports, whispers started forming. Not loud at first, just small cracks in an otherwise polished Hollywood image. A delay here, a creative disagreement there, subtle differences in vision that no one thought would explode into something much bigger. But Hollywood has a pattern, and that pattern is simple. Silence never stays silent for long. The first real shift didn't come from an official statement. It came from people noticing patterns. Fans began pointing out something strange. Why were certain cast members suddenly distancing themselves during interviews? Why did promotional appearances feel divided? Why did some celebrities start speaking carefully, almost as if every word had legal weight? One fan wrote online, "Something feels off, like everyone is choosing sides but nobody is saying it out loud." That one comment sparked thousands more. And just like that, the internet started doing what it does best.
Blake Dumbledore Lively.
Investigating everything. Clips were replayed. Interviews were dissected. Body language analyzed frame by frame. And slowly, a narrative began forming. A narrative of two invisible sides. Team Blake Lively versus Team Justin Baldoni, even though nobody officially confirmed such a divide. But perception in Hollywood is often more powerful than truth. Then came the moment fans describe as the turning point. A wave of online discussions began suggesting that some celebrities who initially showed support for Blake Lively started quietly stepping back. Not publicly reversing statements. Not issuing apologies. But something more subtle: silence. Distance. And in Hollywood, silence is never just silence. It becomes interpretation. It becomes speculation. It becomes fuel. One entertainment insider account claimed, "Some people didn't expect the situation to escalate like this. Now they're rethinking what they said publicly." And that single line changed everything. Because suddenly this wasn't just about a movie or a press cycle anymore. It was about consequences, reputation, and the terrifying reality of being publicly aligned with a story that is still unfolding. And that's where the tension truly begins to build. Because the question now isn't just what happened behind the scenes, it's who said what too early, and who might now be wishing they stayed quiet. But as the internet digs deeper, one more uncomfortable question starts rising from the noise. What exactly did these celebrities see that made them change their tone so quickly? Because as the silence grew louder, the internet didn't slow down, it accelerated. Every tiny detail suddenly became evidence in the court of public opinion. Old interviews resurfaced where celebrities had once spoken confidently in support of Blake Lively, praising the film, praising the creative process, praising the energy on set. But now, those same clips were being replayed with a completely different tone attached to them. People weren't just watching anymore, they were reinterpreting everything. One viral post read, "Look at how uncomfortable they look now compared to back then. Something changed and nobody wants to admit it." And within hours, that clip had millions of views. Comment sections turned into battlegrounds. Team Blake supporters argued that the situation was being twisted unfairly. while others insisted that too many people were backtracking in real time. And then the rumors started. At first, they were soft whispers on entertainment forums. Anonymous accounts claiming that some celebrities who publicly supported Blake Lively were privately questioning what they had stepped into. Not because they had changed their opinion completely, but because the situation was becoming bigger, heavier, and more legally sensitive than anyone expected. A supposed insider post said, "People didn't realize how fast this would escalate. Now everyone is trying to protect their image." That line spread like wildfire because it didn't confirm anything, but it felt believable. And in Hollywood, feels real is often enough to become accepted truth.
There is a rift, and I think that is an understatement of a word, a rift between Taylor Swift and Blake Lively.
Suddenly, fans began noticing small behavioral shifts. A celebrity who once spoke passionately about the project now avoided mentioning it entirely in interviews. Another who had previously shared enthusiastic support suddenly shifted to neutral, carefully worded responses like, "I wish everyone involved the best." No names, no strong opinions, just distance. One fan commented, "Why does it feel like everyone is slowly deleting themselves from this story?" That question hit a nerve online because it reflected what people were already sensing but couldn't fully prove. The energy around the entire situation was changing. What once looked like a united front was starting to feel fragmented, almost like people were quietly stepping backward without announcing it. But the most explosive moment came when a blind item, completely unverified but widely circulated, suggested that certain celebrities who had too quickly chosen sides were now regretting the intensity of their public positioning. Not because of who was right or wrong, but because of the pressure that comes when Hollywood turns into a public courtroom. And suddenly, the conversation shifted again. It wasn't just about Blake Lively or Justin Baldoni anymore. It was about asterisk influence. Asterisk who spoke too early, who trusted the wrong narrative, and who is now stuck trying to rebuild neutrality in a situation that no longer allows it. Entertainment commentators began weighing in. Some said this was a classic Hollywood pattern, support first, clarify later. Others argued this situation felt different because of how emotionally charged and publicly dissected it had become. One commentator said, "In Hollywood, silence can protect you, but once you speak, you become part of the story forever." That line stuck with audiences, because now people were rewatching everything with new suspicion. Even simple red carpet moments were being analyzed. Who stood next to whom? Who avoided eye contact? Who laughed a little too quickly when certain names came up? And as speculation deepened, so did the emotional temperature online. Fans weren't just debating facts anymore, they were assigning intentions. Every celebrity became either aware or regretful, loyal or distancing, brave or careful. But underneath all of this noise,
Videos of this meeting circulated everywhere, and they showed exactly how uncomfortable things had become.
something even more intense was building quietly. Because according to growing online chatter, the real tension wasn't what was being said publicly. It was what was being said privately behind closed doors, where no cameras were rolling and no statements were being prepared. And whatever was happening there seemed to be strong enough to make even the loudest voices suddenly reconsider everything they had already said out loud. But just as the situation appears to stabilize on the surface, a new wave of reactions is about to hit. And this time, it won't just be speculation anymore. It will be emotional fallout that nobody in Hollywood can fully control. As the online noise intensified, what started as speculation slowly turned into something far more dangerous for everyone involved: pressure. Not just public pressure, but industry pressure. The kind that doesn't show up in headlines immediately, but shows up in phone calls, legal teams, PR meetings, and carefully rewritten statements that suddenly sound nothing like the original tone. And that's when the situation stopped feeling like fan debate and started feeling like a real Hollywood fracture. Because now, celebrities who had once openly aligned themselves with Blake Lively began facing a completely different reality. Every word they had said was being replayed, reposted, and reinterpreted through a more aggressive lens. The same support that once looked natural was now being questioned, analyzed, and in some cases, criticized. One viral comment summed up the shift perfectly. It's like everyone is slowly realizing they picked a side in something way bigger than they thought. And that's when things reportedly started getting uncomfortable behind the scenes. Sources circulating online began suggesting that certain public figures were now trying to reframe their earlier involvement, not by denying support, but by softening it. Interviews became more careful. Social media posts became more generic. Even previously strong opinions were replaced with neutral phrases like, "I respect everyone involved," or "I hope the situation gets resolved privately." But fans noticed something else. They noticed hesitation. And hesitation in Hollywood is louder than words. Then came the moment that changed the entire tone of the conversation online. A widely shared thread claimed that some celebrities who had initially supported Blake Lively were now privately distancing themselves from the intensity of the narrative. Not because they were switching sides publicly, but because they were trying to avoid being permanently attached to a conflict that was still evolving in real time. One post read, "Nobody wants to be remembered as the person who spoke too soon." That line exploded across social platforms. Because suddenly, this wasn't just about loyalty anymore. It was about survival. And in the middle of this shifting energy, Justin Baldoni's name started being discussed differently too. Not just as the opposing figure in a controversy, but as someone many were now hesitant to publicly define at all. That hesitation alone created a strange reversal effect online, where people who once spoke confidently now appeared cautious, and people who stayed quiet suddenly seemed strategic. The internet, of course, noticed everything. Clips resurfaced showing earlier praise from celebrities who had supported the film, contrasted against their current silence. Fans began asking, why does it feel like everyone is erasing their footprints? And that question quickly turned into a viral discussion. Some argued it was standard Hollywood behavior, protecting careers, avoiding legal risk, and staying out of unpredictable conflicts. Others believed it pointed to something deeper, suggesting that not everyone fully understood the situation when they initially spoke up. Then came the emotional explosion moment online. A rumor began circulating that a few insiders from within the industry had privately expressed regret, not necessarily about supporting Blake Lively, but about how quickly public narratives forced people into choosing sides before all facts were fully clear. One entertainment page wrote, "The regret isn't personal, it's procedural. People are regretting how fast they were pushed into positions they couldn't later step out of." That framing changed everything again, because it reframed the entire drama from personal betrayal to industry chaos. But by now, the audience was no longer just watching. They were emotionally invested, divided, defensive, and in many cases, deeply convinced that something larger was unfolding behind closed doors. Then came the biggest twist in perception so far. A shift in tone from celebrities who had previously been very vocal. Instead of strong statements, interviews started featuring phrases like, "I don't know the full story," or "It's not my place to comment." And those words, simple, careful, almost harmless, were interpreted by the internet as something much bigger. Retreat, distance, recalibration. One fan wrote, "Nobody is defending anything anymore. Everyone is just trying to survive the narrative." And that might be the most revealing part of this entire situation. Because whether or not anyone actually regrets their support or silence, one thing is clear in Hollywood right now. Being attached to a fast-moving public conflict can become heavier than the conflict itself. And as the noise continues to grow, as edits, rumors, and theories keep circulating, one final emotional question starts to take over the conversation. If so many people are now stepping back, softening their words, or refusing to speak at all, what happens when the silence finally becomes louder than the story itself? And that question is exactly where everything now sits. Not in resolution, not in clarity, but in silence that feels heavier than any headline ever published. Because as the weeks passed, something unusual happened in this Hollywood storm. The shouting online didn't stop, but the responses from the people inside the story started fading. Interviews that once sparked debate were no longer being referenced. Posts that once triggered massive threads were slowly replaced by newer controversies. And just like that, the internet moved on in one direction, while the emotional residue of the situation stayed behind. But those who were watching closely noticed something important. Nobody really won the narrative. Instead, everyone involved seemed to step into a different phase. One where visibility was reduced, statements were rare, and public energy shifted from confrontation to avoidance. And that's where the idea of regret began to take a different shape. Not regret in the dramatic sense, not people publicly admitting mistakes or reversing support, but something quieter, more uncomfortable. The kind of regret that shows up as hesitation before speaking, as deleted drafts, as carefully rewritten interviews, as PR teams double-checking every sentence before it reaches the public. One entertainment commentator put it like this: In Hollywood, regret doesn't always mean you were wrong. Sometimes it just means you didn't anticipate how loud the echo would be. And that echo is exactly what this entire situation left behind. Because Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni's names are now permanently tied to a moment in Hollywood where perception moved faster than confirmation, where support turned into scrutiny, and where silence became its own form of communication. Fans still debate it daily. Some insist the celebrities who spoke out were brave for taking a stand early. Others argue that too many voices entered too quickly, without understanding how complicated the situation would become once it left private spaces and entered public consumption. And somewhere in the middle of all that debate, the celebrities themselves remain mostly quiet. Careful, controlled, measured, almost as if the loudest lesson they learned wasn't about choosing sides, but about what happens when Hollywood decisions are made in real time under public pressure. One fan comment that keeps resurfacing sums up the entire emotional core of this story. It's not that they regret who they supported, it's that they regret how fast everything turned into a war. And maybe that's the real ending here. Not a dramatic confession, not a public reversal, not a clear winner or loser, just a shifting silence where everyone involved seems to have learned the same thing in different ways. In Hollywood, once you speak too early, you don't just join the conversation. You become part of the storm forever. And now the question left hanging over everything is simple, but heavy. When the noise finally fades completely, who will still stand by what they said, and who will wish they never spoke at all? If you've followed this story, drop your thoughts in the comments, because this one is dividing opinions more than ever. Were celebrities right to take a stand early, or did they get pulled into a narrative that was still unfolding? And most importantly, do you think anyone actually regrets it, or is the internet reading too much into silence? And if you want more deep Hollywood breakdowns like this, make sure to subscribe, because the next story brewing behind the scenes might be even bigger than this one.